Um, it's been quite a while since I've had the last press conference. And so today I'm going to deal with a few of the most critical issues that have been in the media, because there have been many issues and I don't want to overload the press conference with all those matters. Now, I think the most important issue, at least the most topical one now, seems to be local government elections. And so we have seen the position of the opposition. They have made some very definitive statements that, one, that they're not going to go to any election unless there is a new list. And secondly, that the chair of GCOM must resign. And then recently we've seen the three commissioners representing the opposition speaking about the introduction of biometrics. So let me go through these issues sequentially. First of all, the question of the new list has been addressed several times. And it seems as though Lilliputian Norton doesn't understand that it would be unconstitutional to remove people's names from the voters list without, given the ruling of the Chief Justice and the Constitution itself. So we are not going to, in the People's Progressive Party, we're not going to support any process that is unconstitutional. Now, Norton comes from a party that has a history of acting unconstitutionally in several instances, apart from the fact that they come from a history of rigging elections, a well-documented history of rigging elections. You would recall it was that party that unconstitutionally foisted a chairman on GCOM that was subsequently challenged by the People's Progressive Party, and he was removed by the Caribbean Court of Justice because the act was an unconstitutional one. Secondly, it was that party that refused to act in accordance with the Constitution to hold the elections after the government fell in November 2018 within the constitutionally prescribed period. And again, we had to go all the way to the Caribbean Court of Justice to have a ruling on that matter. And even with the ruling, they refused to hold the elections, and it was only through a combination of pressure, international pressure, and street action that led to the elections being held. So this party has a history of acting in an unconstitutional manner. The Constitution of Guyana was amended with the agreement of all the parties in the country in the early 2000s. It was amended. There were three criteria for registration and for voting in elections in Guyana. In the old Constitution, it was Guyanese, 18 years and above, and resident in Guyana. In the early 2000s, the residency requirement was removed from the Constitution. And as I said before, all the parties agreed to this. So you cannot remove a person from the list if he is not resident in Guyana, he or she is not resident in Guyana. The APNU tried this when they tried to do the house-to-house registration that the illegal chairman ordered and that Lowenfield pursued. And the matter was litigated in court, and the Chief Justice ruled that it's unconstitutional to remove people's name based on residency. This is precisely what Norton wants us to do, to act in an unconstitutional manner. If we were to do so, just imagine what will happen. All you need is one person who is not resident in Guyana to go to the court and challenge it. And immediately that would be overturned. It would be declared unconstitutional. So we are not going to act in an unconstitutional manner. We're not going to be complicit with the People's National Congress in this issue. Secondly, this issue of biometrics, because it's all linked. Now, we support the use of biometrics to improve polling day controls. However, we will not support the use of biometrics as a restriction on people's right to vote. So this is what the commissioners said in a statement that they issued, the three APNU commissioners. They said in the 2020 elections, there were numerous allegations of voters' impersonation. Now, I don't know of a single allegation of voters' impersonation until they tried to sabotage the recount. APNU had polling agents in almost every one of the over 2,000 polling places in this country. And they all signed the statements of poll. There was never a claim of any voter impersonation until they attempted to create confusion at the recount. So that statement is false, absolutely false. Secondly, they said that GCOM was provided with documentation from statutory agencies and bodies to substantiate these allegations. You recall the GRA producing a fictitious list and then immigration producing another list of who was in the country and who was not, and we found people here who they said were abroad, who never had traveled out of the country. So that is the evidence that they're referring to. Now, here today, I'm going to urge the government to launch an investigation into these allegations and this so-called evidence provided by the statutory agencies. Because now, with the passage of time, I think we've been a bit lax on taking tough action against those people who fabricated this data. And I'm going to urge the government to go back and look at all of those, the so-called evidence that was provided by the statutory agencies, make them public so the media would have that, and then launch an investigation as to how they were put together, because they're false information. And if illegal false information is provided by statutory agencies with the purpose of corrupting an election, then the people who provided that information should face the consequences. So I'm going to urge that that happens. And then they want, thirdly, the commissioners, as part of their presentation on biometrics or their support for biometrics, they want the parliament to pass legislation. So this brings me back to the old case, the Esther Pereira case, and the Act 22 of 1997, the Elections Law Amendment Act. Because the parties, the political parties in Guyana, agreed that we must go to Parliament together to provide a law, to pass a law, which we all supported, that ID cards should be used as a form of identification for voters, for voting, on voting day. APNU supported it fully, the PNC at that time. When they lost the elections, they then got Esther Pereira to go to court to challenge the legality of that law, the Elections Law Amendment Act, claiming that it conflicted with the Constitution of Guyana, that the Constitution of Guyana has only said for you to be registered and vote, and to vote, you have to be Guyanese and 18 years and above. So the court then ruled, Justice Claudette Singh, that the use of ID card, which all the parties had agreed to, pursuant to the act, was illegal. And she cut the term of office of the PPP by 2 years. We had to go to elections by 2001, the 31st, I think, in the the order, before a particular date. We lost 2 years of our term because of a decision that the parties took and jointly went to the parliament on, that subsequently was declared unconstitutional. I think this is precisely the trap that they're hoping to set once again. That we go to the parliament, we pass a law on biometrics to prevent people from voting, only on the basis of these biometrics. And then they lose the elections and they go back to court again using the same challenge that they did in 1997, that the use of biometrics was unconstitutional. And we're not going to fall into that trap again. So whilst we don't have a problem with strengthening polling day control, which is crucial, the use of biometrics cannot prevent people from voting. In fact, now you can vote without your ID card or a passport. You can just go and swear to a declaration that you're the person and you're allowed to vote. And that is constitutional. So Mr. Norton, as I said before, he is now ready for the big leagues. He has always operated as a junior functionary. So I don't think he believes that people could see through the very transparent motives that he speaks about, that he has in his pronouncements. So he said, or that he will be fact-checked. So he said that Guyana has the highest ratio of voters to population on the voters list, that is, in the world. And I think a few of the newspapers pointed out that's false. Many Caribbean countries have a higher ratio of voters, people on the voters list to total population. He didn't fact check that. And secondly, he doesn't think that people will see through this whole issue of the biometrics. And thirdly, he thinks he can bully his way into having us do something unconstitutional. And now talking about bully, this small timer who said that Refinery bullied him into a handshake now is trying to bully the chairman of GCOM. And, you know, so I've seen him on several occasions say some of the most disparaging things about the chair of GCOM. But what bothered me the most is that on 2 occasions, he has issued a not so veiled threat to the chairman of GCOM. And I'm shocked that civil society and the international community has not responded to this. That Norton has threatened on more than one occasions the chairman of GCOM, the head of an independent statutory body, because he's not happy with her. He's threatened that if she doesn't, if she's not removed, she'd have to face some consequences. And not a single member of civil society, the conscience of the country, nor anyone from the international community has called him out on this threat. We're going to be writing. I'm going to ask Gail Teixeira to write to every international organization exposing this threat by the leader of the opposition against the chair of GCOM. He's hoping to intimidate her into either acting in a pro-PNC manner or to get rid of her because she's impartial. So, on these election-related matters, I've seen the threats mirrored by many of the APNU supporters and leaders. And I hope that from now on, you will not treat his threats as inconsequential, although he doesn't generate, I don't think he generates issues of much weight and consequence. But we must see an open condemnation across the country on this. Now they talk about the Representation of the People Act. So as soon as Parliament comes out of recess, and hopefully before local government elections, and we are ready, he said, the PPP doesn't want local government elections. We're already gone on an election footing. We'll be ready whether elections are held this year or next year. We don't control when that happens, GCOM does, but we'll be ready at any time. He is in a dilemma because he said he is not going to elections unless there is a new voters list. And trust me, there cannot be a new voters list before the local government elections, nor are we willing to act in an unconstitutional manner. So I suspect he would backtrack, put his tail between his legs, and he would have to go to local government elections. So let me tell you what are the things that are part of the Representation of People, the People's Act, that will be passed before local government elections, the new features that we are pursuing. So one is to reduce the discretionary powers of the CEO. We've seen a lot of that. The CEO, I remember Lowenfield, when we asked for the manual, when we asked for anything in writing, he would have it in his head. have it in his head. But that gave him a lot of discretionary powers to change things at a moment's notice and convenient to the master plan for rigging the elections. Well, no, after the law is amended in October, no CEO will have that power. All the manuals and training materials for GCOM staff to be made would have to be made public 3 months before the election. So a manual would have to be published. Every member of civil society, the international community, the entire media will see the entire manual for the conduct of elections. They will see the role of each of the staff of GCOM and all the procedures that would have to be followed, so that there is no room for doubt as to what and how the elections will be conducted. Thirdly, the polling places would have to be identified long before election day. You recall that on the night of before the elections, in the last elections, they were busy identifying polling places. And that gave a lot of authority. We had to practically beg Mingo. You recall in the question of Fowles and Paradise, they were shifting all of the polling places out of Fowles to move people into Paradise, a long distance away from where they live. And that big fight that we had even up till late that night in the last election. So this will not happen in future elections once this law is passed. They would have to identify polling places long before that. The posting of the statements of poll on GCOM's website. These would all have to be posted. Procedures for tabulations would have to be made public, and the entire tabulation process must be a public one. Clearly identifying materials that have to be retained by polling agents and those that have to be put in the box. You recall what has happened. Mingo changed the instructions in 40-odd boxes on the East Coast. He told the presiding officers in those cases, keep the material. They took that material to the office in GCOM. We saw the material here, were in big bags, garbage bags. And then in the recount, they were claiming, oh, the materials are missing because they were not placed in the box. When they were, for the rest of the country, they were all in the box. So that will not happen. I can go through all of the other issues, the penalties for electoral offenses, people that have to go to jail if they try to tamper with elections. The Region 4 will be now divided into 4 sub-districts. We're not dividing Region 4. It is just for administrative purposes, and in fact, that's already done when the tabulation is done. So you can better manage East Coast, East Bank, North Georgetown, and South Georgetown. When you recall the tabulation in the last election, that's how it was done. It would be formalized now, so that you can have more people now managing those constituencies or those areas because they have large number of voters. So these are all matters that will be addressed that would strengthen the conduct of elections in the future. APNU doesn't want this. They don't want to participate in this process. Note every issue they want to participate in or want addressed are issues that they can then use to cast doubts on future election results. They're setting the basis, as they were setting the basis to rig the elections, and the no confidence motion threw them off a bit because they had Felix working at GRO, several hundreds of thousands of birth certificates were procured. They had a special unit to digitize the records there. They were going to go to house and drop registration and drop a number of people. They had installed a sympathetic chairman or a GCOM. That was all part, and then Lowenfield and the others were compromised. And so it was all part of a system, a network designed for rigging the elections. The no confidence motion came and disrupted a lot of this careful plan that was laid out. So now we're watching it carefully. So if Norton believes, Norton can't bully Irfan Ali. In fact, he claims Irfan Ali bullied him into a handshake. Norton can't bully me because I know who he is. He used to, Norton, let me don't make much about that, yes. He can't bully me. He's trying to bully the chairman of GCOM. He's trying to bully a woman, and that's all. That's all he could do, is fit for. And so that's one issue. The second issue that dominated the so-called rally from which they mobilized and brought people was this whole issue about discrimination against Afro-Guyanese. So I saw an ad out where the Coffee 250 committee is inviting people to join a discussion. And the discussion is resisting the emerging apartheid state in Guyana. So we've already seen a response from Mr. Floyd Haynes saying he disagrees with this characterization and that they never consulted with him when they put his name there and published his picture as one of the participants, because his experience is a very different one. So I see here Mr. Vincent Alexander and the chairman, Dr. Norman Nigaki. So on this ad, well, let me tell you about a bit more about these two persons, and then you will conclude for yourself what's happening in this country and how this group of individuals has not only failed Afro-Guyanese, but they are living the good life on the back, claiming that they believe in a cause that is all pursuant or based on their own personal pecuniary interests. So you recall that an organization, a private limited liability company, was established on the International Decade for People of African Descent Assembly. This is a private limited liability company. The beneficial owners of this company are many people here. Vincent Alexander, Olive Sampson, Dr. Norman Nigaki, Simpson De Silva, Mark Curtin, Rosemary Davis, Miriam Levi, Royston Peters. These are the people who are listed as the beneficial owners of this company. So this company has received from the government of Ghana, a private limited liability company. We're listing these people as beneficial owners. They've received $68 million in 2018, $100 million in 2019, $100 million in 2020, $100 million in 2021, and $100 million in 2022. So they have received nearly $500 million of taxpayers' money. This group of people that I just mentioned, who claim that they represent Afro-Guyanese, $500 million of taxpayers' money to advance the cause of Afro-Guyanese. From the PPP government, this is the same party that has given them, or the government has given them over $200 million, nearly $250 million, because we're an emerging apartheid state. Emerging apartheid. We're funding basically them criticizing the government. This is effectively what is happening. You find out from this $500 million how much of the money has ever gone to any ordinary Afro-Guyanese. So the first thing is, this group of people that claim they represent Afro-Guyanese, they have a private limited liability company that they establish, and they receive nearly $500 million of taxpayers' money. Let me give you, this is their financial statement for 2020. I think this is the last year they had a financial statement. So salaries and allowances, $42 million. Conference expenses, $4.5 million. Traveling and transportation, $2.8. Advertisement, $2 million. Office material and expenses, $9 million. Building rentals and utility, $5 million. So I can go down, because that's it. But let me go to disbursement of grant funds. How much they gave out in grants to Afro-Guyanese? $343,000. $343,000 disbursement of grant. But 42 million of the 100 million, that's for 2020. Doesn't this country see that these are parasites using Afro-Guyanese just for their own personal benefits? I saw Henry Jeffrey's name there. Henry Jeffrey was part of the PPP government all the years until he was terminated for incompetence. Not for anything else. They're just utilizing, as I've said before. They lived the cause. The cause is just to shout as much as possible about discrimination so that they can draw the benefits in. Look at the WPA, Clive Thomas and David Hines are there. You find out in the 5 years they were in government under APNU, what did David Hines do for the people in Buxton? He's back in Buxton now. In 5 years, tell me a single thing that what he did to bring greater benefits to people there. Not a single thing. Not a single thing. So before they host this activity, I'd like them to have a press conference so they can tell the people of this country that what they've done with the nearly $500 million of taxpayers' money they've received and how much they've utilized to give in the interest of ordinary Afro-Guyanese in this country. Who received all of this money? Nearly $500 million. Now, let's look at some of the facts now. On scholarships. So David Hines said, oh, we're not empowering Afro-Guyanese. But you can empower them through greater scholarships. So in the first year of the PPP government, in the first year, the gold program, more Afro-Guyanese got scholarships in 1 year than in the 5 years under APNU when they were in office. And this could be verified, asked Professor Obade. More Afro-Guyanese got scholarships in the first year in office than in the 5 years on the APNU. That's a fact, if you're talking about empowering Afro-Guyanese. More Afro-Guyanese got land in the first 2 years of the PPP government than in the 5 years under APNU, significantly more. If you're talking about facts on empowerment. Thirdly, the money that they remove from the children of this country. Our children are children of every race in this country that received the $30,000 cash grant. So if you look at the proportionately, the share of the population in terms of ethnic composition, Afro-Guyanese kids would have received $3.7 billion this year, that they were receiving zero under APNU. $3.7 billion, because the total is over $6 billion. The total for the $30,000 for every child. That's $3.7 billion more going to their pockets than they didn't have when APNU was there. In fact, APNU took away the 10,000 grant from all the kids of the country. Afro-Guyanese, Indo-Guyanese, Amerindian, everybody. That's empowering. That's giving more money in a real sense to our kids. The joint services. We know a lot of Afro-Guyanese work in the joint services too. 1 month bonus. If you leave out the tax-free part, it's $1.2 billion more per year, a 1 month bonus returned to them. So they have $1.2 billion more a year that they didn't have under APNU. I can go down this long list of real things. And my conclusion is that Afro-Guyanese have under a small business grant more than any time under APNU. I can conclude that under the PPP, factually, every time the BP has been in office, Afro-Guyanese and all Guyana has made more progress than any time under APNU. David Hines and the others will never talk about these figures because they have to shout about apartheid state, and this is doing a disservice to apartheid and the struggles of the South African people. Do they know what apartheid is? And this is what they have a conference on. So, and this apartheid government is giving them $500 million, well, nearly $250 million since it got into office, to struggle to displace the apartheid government. So let us, they have no good whatsoever. All they're interested in is creating trouble in the country and for their personal financial benefits. No, they don't care about any cause. They don't care about any cause. I see a lot of issues on the oil and gas sector. And so Mr. Lal will wake up now so that I'm dealing with the oil and gas sector. He's a bit bored on the other matters.
You ready for my question?
Yes, you get your chance to ask your questions.
Thank you.
So I looked at I'm not going to go through all of the issues, but there are some that need answers. And in no particular order, I'm going to try to address them. So the auction, you saw the minister saying that we may have a slippage on the auction. So let me tell you precisely what we are engaged in at this point in time. So we have all of the areas potentially that we are going to put out to auction. We have 3D seismic for some areas. We have 2D seismic for some areas. And we have no data for some other areas. So before the end of August, we have to make a determination, one, on whether we will pursue the strategic partnership idea, or we will put out everything to auction, or do a combination of both. Secondly, before the end of August, we have to decide on the blocks, how we want to split these potential areas into blocks and what size these blocks should be. So we are going to get technical advice on that. Thirdly, we have, before the end of August, we have to make a decision on whether we allow existing companies in Guyana, particularly ExxonMobil, to participate in the auction, and if so, would there be a limit to the number of blocks one person could have or not? So that decision has to be made. We have to also work swiftly, and this is where we may have some delay, because we now need to determine the fiscal terms for the new prospecting license. And this brings me to that very, very contentious issue that we've had in the public domain, which is the fairness of the contract and what the future take for Guyana will be. Because the prospecting licenses that will have to be issued to the successful bidders will have to outline those terms. And so it will say whether we will retain the 50-50 model, that is, after clearing costs, the profit oil would be divided equally between the investor and the government, what the royalty rate will be, what would be the other fiscal terms in the contract. And this needs determination very, very early, but it is a contentious issue, and we have a number of pieces being worked on. So it is trying to put all of this together in a framework that is fair to the investor, that would allow so that they get a decent return on their capital, that would promote accelerated exploration, and then thirdly, importantly, would allow the country to enjoy a greater share of future benefits should they proceed with production agreements. So this is a major issue that could slow down the auction a bit. And that is the biggest issue, not the first ones that I've spoken about, but the fiscal terms of the petroleum prospecting license that would have to be issued to a successful bidder. That is the one that may be a bit more contentious and that we're working through at this stage. Of course, we're looking at the 1986 Act, the Petroleum Act, to see that it allows us to pursue an auction in the manner that we wish. Because in the past, all of the contracts were given out on a first-come, first-served basis, like what has happened at GGMC with the gold mining prospecting license, where first come, first serve, they get the contract. Now we've decided to go to an auction. So we have to ensure that our legislative regime supports this competitive process for securing future blocks. So these are all the variables. I'm being totally frank with you, so that the timeline could be adjusted on the basis of how swiftly we can resolve this multiple of issues. And that is what is currently ongoing within the government circles, the technical work that's being done. We're getting some external help to do this and to do all of this preparation. So when we go to auction, we can maximize the benefit to the country. That's one issue. Secondly, I've seen a report somewhere that we utilize all of the money from the IDB loan, and we have very little to show for it. And two, that they had done a depletion policy for Guyana, and we have departed from that depletion policy. So on the first issue, this was a policy-based loan. It is not a project loan. So on a policy-based loan, although the agency has to fulfill the conditions, the disbursement goes to the Treasury and the central bank, not to the agency. That is how policy-based loans operate. So it's not like the money came to the Ministry of Natural Resources and then got utilized there. The policy-based loans are often to support the budget, for financing the budget, or for balance of payment support. If the money did not come to the ministry to spend. So that's the first issue. Secondly, there was no depletion policy that was done for Guyana. What the IDB did was to hire a consultant, and just a consultant. Now we have good consultants, we have bad consultants, we have consultants who don't care anything about this country. But this consultant established the principles, like a framework in which a depletion policy should be developed. Not that they developed a depletion policy for Guyana. So to characterize this as the government paid no heed to it and departed from it or ignored it, it's not like that was true. There's no depletion policy that was done for Guyana. And any depletion policy that's being done today has to include one key variable. The key variable is net zero. If net zero is not included in any depletion policy, it will not be fit for purpose. It will not be fit for purpose. And so I saw that those issues, because for several days people were talking about this in the newspapers, and it's basically, it's not true, some of the things, the way it was put over. There's been a lot of to and froing on the issue of insurance between a number of people, Vincent Adams, the EPA, and others have weighed in on this matter. I'm not going to say what I feel personally about some of these people. But as was recognized, that in all of the permits, the oil and the legislation, the EPA legislation, that the permit holders are liable for the full extent of any environmental damage caused to our country and the cleaning up of any oil spill that may occur. The Act states this, and the permits now state this. So the argument is that how do they give a particular instrument, and what instrument should be held by the EPA to ensure that there is some teeth to this commitment that is required by law or by the permit. The first, so insurance. So Exxon has provided insurance policy which says they're liable up to, or they have insurance coverage up to 600 million per event. And then the second aspect is a parent guarantee to cover the full liability. Okay? So the EPA has been in discussion about a $2 billion because they believe that the events may not exceed that. Not that they believe that. They've asked the companies to provide a study as to what they believe this liability can be, maximum liability can be. Not that we would accept that, because we believe that there has to be a full coverage, that they have to take responsibility for total cleanup and restoration. So the difference between the two sides is not that Exxon has to take full coverage and that's provided by a law and each permit. It is what instrument we now get to give us the comfort level. And we have a partial instrument, which is the insurance, and now we have to get a parent guarantee. And that is where, from the government's perspective, forget the EPA, the parent company has to ensure that we have such a guarantee that will cover all potential damage. That is our position from the government's perspective. So, as everybody recognizes, that every time there's more insurance, you have to take more insurance, the premiums come off of cost oil too. So we have to pay for it. And sometimes it's better to have the parent guarantee, because that doesn't cost the company the money for the premium, and therefore it's less cost oil, and therefore more profit oil for us to share. So we now have to, it's not like, when I look back, I step back and I looked at this debate, it seems as though that's the only issue, because it's not like in all the noise and all the moving parts, it's that there is an agreement on all sides that they have to take full responsibility. Our law says that. And I think they have themselves publicly said that. So it is the instrument, and we're committed to ensuring that there is an appropriate insurance or guarantee that can cover that eventuality. And also, we have to look at the additional safeguard that the value of the company now, the local company, the locally incorporated company, has about 7 billion in assets. That's what the valuation is. So I'm not going to, I've looked through this, and every day it's going back and forth, and I see little parts moving here and there, and sometimes we're talking the same thing and fighting over the same thing that we agree with. So that's how I'm going to deal with that matter. Now, I see a number of issues that were raised about the gas-to-energy project once again, and about the financial feasibility. And let me make it clear again to you. As I said the last time we met. So, at $1 billion for the pipeline, okay, that's the bid, that's the price, the estimate. And based on, but before I do that, let me just tell you, so we went out to tender for the power plant and the NGL facility. We're receiving bids the first week of September. We're hoping that those bids come in. They're very competitive. There are 9 companies. They come in well. We've defined the technology we want to use, which is Western technology, either Siemens or GE. Western technology that has been defined. So whoever the bidder is, they'd have to use technology that we're comfortable with. We're hoping those bids come in between the range, or in the range that we had when people were submitting proposals for pre-qualification, which came in between 550 million to about 700 million. That's the range that when they were submitting their proposals for pre-qualification. So if we use those numbers for the NGL and the power plant, the NGL facility and the power plant, and we use, say, $1 billion for the pipeline, the actual could be much lower, probably would have been much, much lower had we not had this supply shock. You see everywhere. I saw Brazil is now going Petrobras for an FPSO, and the prices have skyrocketed because of what is happening around the world, the price of steel and everything else. So if we use those as the numbers, say the outer range, 700 million for the NGL and the power plant, and $1 billion for the pipeline. So that's $1.7 billion for the whole project. We believe it can come in lower. But let's use that since we don't have the actual numbers now. The actual numbers will come in later. So we're very conservative. We're using outside numbers. Now, what will be the cost of generating power? How much will it cost Guyana to pay back for these pipeline, the NGL plant, and the power plant? How much will it cost us in the price of power? So we, at 4 cents now per kilowatt hour, remember I said 5 cents, I wanted to be conservative, between 4 to 5 cents per kilowatt hour, we will be paying back the full $1.7 billion. We will be paying for the operating costs for both the power plant and the NGL facility. So that means we will be paying because the gas is free. So the gas is free, we pay back for the capital cost, the $1.7 billion, we pay to operate the facilities, and it will still cost us 4 cents per kilowatt hour. Now it's costing us nearly 20 cents per kilowatt hour with the high price of oil. And we're selling at 30 cents per kilowatt hour. So if we sell at 15 cents, and that is it, 15 cents, that's our aim, to sell at half of what it is, and you're generating at 4 cents per kilowatt hour, we can have enough money to build a smart grid and still make a profit and pay back for the entire infrastructure. And then have our emissions cut by more than 50% because we're now using a cleaner fuel than bunker C. And that is paying back the full $1.7 billion. 4 cents at 4 to 5 cents per kilowatt hour. How much more feasible do you want to get? Every country in the world would be happy to latch on to a project like this. Every country. Where now can you get power generated at 4 to 5 cents per kilowatt hour? And you can pay back the entire project. And remember, this pipeline that you're paying back from the 4 to 5 cents per kilowatt hour can bring in more gas. We're only bringing 50 million. When we bring in the other 80 million cubic per day, we've already paid for the pipeline from the 4 to 5 cents per kilowatt hour. When we monetize that, that's a lot more profit that we can share. And then we're getting all the liquids free too, because so we'll get the cooking gas that we can then sell and export, because we can't use all of that. That comes to the government 100%. I'm not even calculating that. So this is, we anticipate that just the sale of the liquids without even the 4 and 5 cents per kilowatt hour selling power itself, but the liquid, our share of the cooking gas and everything, when sold, can pay back for the whole project, because it will be all free coming to the government to utilize, to sell to the local market and to export. And we'd have propane and a whole range of other things. So I hear a new twist now. And I see Patterson now, the infamous guy who couldn't even select the site for where this would be landed, this project. By now we should have had that project operating and cheaper power. But he couldn't even now. He is concerned that we don't have a gas leak management plan about the project, you know? So of course, the gas leak management plan would all have to be done, and we haven't put in the pipeline as yet too. The pipeline, we haven't even laid the pipeline as yet, but that should. We must have the plan before the pipeline is laid. In every such facility, you have to have a gas leak management plan. It is normal. It's not anything, so you, in case you have that. I see, in the US, 8 explosions and all sorts of stuff. If we do that, could never do anything. Why put up this power plant at Kingston? That could explode too and burn down the whole Kingston. What if that explodes there? I mean, not before anything happens. But what happened? We don't no project in the country. Why should we build a school? What happens if the school fall down or somebody come and burn the school down? Should we have a anti-fire or anti-arson plan in the country? Maybe we should. That is the big reason. We're losing the big picture of what this project can mean for our people and our country, our businessmen, our ordinary people who can see reliable power. We'd have enough power for all the street lights. Everywhere you go in the communities, people want street lights. They want lights on everywhere. In the communities, they want reliable power. They want power extended. They want it cheaper power. This project can solve all of those concerns for our people. It's transformative. We're missing all of this. And it's financially feasible too. So I've seen a lot of report on refineries. We have about 8 or 9 proposals on refineries now. And some of them are making outlandish claims. I'm not going to say much about that, but the government is looking at all of these applications. In fact, you can't go with all of them. And I see people saying we're building a refinery here and there and stuff like that. So everyone, in any case, it presupposes that one, we'd have to sell them the crude. 2, that we will have a greater level of emission here because refineries are more polluting. And 3, they would want fiscal concessions because of the scale of the investment. They would want fiscal concessions that may seem too lucrative. And that is the 3 issues on one side. On the other hand, having a small refinery here could make a big difference for energy security. Because if we have, for example, hurricanes or any other disaster, and we can't get our supply of gas or kerosene or anything else, then having a local refinery, a small one, can make a big difference for national energy security. So these are the variables we're looking at now. But you have a number of people out there who are looking to get an MOU from the government just to shop around. And I've seen a lot reported on as though this is going to happen tomorrow. And I just want to urge caution with that. And I've given you all the variables that we're considering in this matter, because the energy security is an important issue for Guyana, future energy security. A lot of people talk about value added, but when you look at the concessions you may have to give in the long run and the emissions that they bring, it may net out some of the other benefits. Now, clearly, there's no contradiction between myself and Refinery on the negotiations. I was speaking about at Canal about the Rystad study, which I agree with some people. I came here and said, everything is so fantastic about this contract that we have with Exxon. And I said, we can't deal in the extremes. And then I spoke about the Kaicho news, saying everything is bad about the contract. And I said, that's also an extreme. And I said, the government will stay in the middle because we're not going to fall prey to populism. That is, it's going to be a studied approach. We're going to give reasons why we do things and why we want accelerated depletion production, why we believe that this contract should not be renegotiated at this time. So that is what we're saying. So when I said that their contract, I'm speaking about the general contract, that contract in future, not the Exxon contract, the Stabroek contract, but the contract that is so lucrative to the oil companies, that is lopsided in favor of the oil companies, that has to change in the future. That is the contract I'm speaking about, the particular one. So I might have been a little bit loose with my language, but I've been public on this matter a million times before, so you know my position. From opposition to now, I've been consistent on that future contracts will not have the shape nor the concessions that this contract has. And so that is clear on the matter. And I've been at this long enough for you to know my position has not changed on that issue. Now on the contract bundling, and I think we have to do more. We made it clear to the oil and gas companies that is not just about local content, the bit dealing with local content, the carve-outs, that there must be a fair opportunity for Guyanese and other companies to be able to identify and bid on other opportunities that are available to the company. So a Guyanese company could bid by virtue of it being, or qualifying, by virtue of it qualifying under the local content legislation, enjoy preferences. But in the areas that are not carved out, they must also see the opportunities in those areas so they're not excluded from the bidding process. That was made clear to the oil and gas companies, and therefore the legislation, the procurement policy, I don't think we need to go back to Parliament to change that. This is clear. How do we know that we're getting the best deal? How do we know that we're limiting cost oil if we don't go through a competitive process in some of these areas? There's some technical areas that it's hard for you to unbundle without making nonsense of the whole issue. Like if you can't split a part into 4 parts and say, you supply the bearing and another man the piston or something like that. That doesn't make sense. But I believe that the oil companies and the first-tier contractors can do much more to present the opportunities here in a manner that local people can utilize. And I've seen a lot of people who pushed us to be very aggressive on the local content legislation and to look at high ratios for carve-outs. They're doing very little, just sitting around griping. These are some local companies too. Sitting around griping all day long instead of setting themselves up to make use of these opportunities. So we can address all of these matters. I see another issue that's been in the media a while, this issue of Chinese landing. And let me make it clear about our position on this matter. Now, the president and we sat with the Tushao and the councillors at the last NTC meeting. And it was explained to them that throughout this process, GGMC and the government was on their side. The other party secured a ruling from the CCJ. Now, the reason is that this the permit to mine, the license there, was issued before the Amerindian Act. And so it presented some complications. And so the CCJ ruled that the GGMC cannot enforce the Amerindian Act. They can only enforce breaches of the Act. So we've heard about a lot of breaches. And we heard from the Tushao and the others that there seems to be a very cozy relationship between many of the officers of the GGMC and the individual. We heard about the bullying of the communities, the threatening of the councillors and the Tushaos. And even on the airstrip, people being prevented to access from the village, being prevented to access the airstrip. And so the president has made it clear that to the civil aviation, that flights can only go into these areas unless only if they have the approval of the council as part of the reclaiming of the rights of this Amerindian community, and that we will not countenance any bullying of the people in this community. The president ordered also at that meeting that there be a surprise visit, because we hear every time that the people go there, there are lots of illegal miners there too, and every time there's a planned raid, the people know long before and they hide the equipment. And so the president ordered a surprise raid on this area. To my surprise, I saw that apparently a visit was made and the very people were showing the staff of the GGMC around. So I was privy to that meeting. I met with the Tushao and the councillors at the convention center. We sat there. The president then joined the meeting, and we had a discussion with them. So we are not going to tolerate any violation of people's rights. And so this is happening, it seems, with the complicity of some individuals at the junior level within the government. And this brings me to the next issue too, because somewhere it was pointed out that I said a year that we will be charging the people for the Gael matter. I think it was somewhere in the media. And so I asked, because I've now been following these issues, I expected from what I saw at the beginning when we assumed office that nearly $1 billion was stolen from fuel, stealing fuel from Gael. So we expect, we're not like APNU calling the police every day, go after this person, don't go after that person. So I asked for a report, and it seems as though 3 persons were charged. Some are Terry Milling, a Dylan Wilson, and a Gangadeo Sridat. So for something of simple larceny of fuel value, $745 million. Now, Mr. Ram was doing an audit. But what struck me is that the masterminds were not charged. These are small people. Because you recall the correspondence from Winston Jordan. I don't want to mention it here because it has some foul language in it. You recall about how and to whom fuel should be given. And that angle, the mastermind angle, was never investigated, because I'm sure these were the people who were just executing it. They were doing it for others. So now I'm going to ask the police publicly to look into this too. Because it seems as though because we don't do like what happened with the last Soku, call them and say, you go after this person. But it doesn't mean that we've forgotten. Maybe we just moved on a bit because we're busy with other issues. But they have to go after the mastermind, especially when now I see the masterminds have become church boys and suddenly they're the cleanest people in the world. From the sordid history that they had in the 5 years. I see they're talking about, the vice issue. Patterson received $9,000 US from a Chinese company when that the government had already paid him for reimbursement, and he never paid it back to the Bharrat, and it was only after we made that a public issue then he returned the money. 2 years after, it was 2017, he received the money from the Chinese company, and he paid it in 2019 when it became a political issue. That was a real case. They want allegations investigated on the Sioux matter. Well, we made it clear. I don't want to delve into it too much because I filed a lawsuit against the individual. But this is the same sort of thing that happens. So we now need to deal with some of these issues. Anyhow, maybe I should just end here. Thank you. It's been a while. All right.
Good afternoon, sir. Kian Wilmer, Metro News. I want to make a quick clarification, then I'm going to a question on part of your statement.
Okay. You're asking me to clarify, or you're clarifying your position?
No, I'm making a clarification about the story you spoke about.
Okay, all right, okay.
So the story that you noted on the depletion policy,
Okay.
you said that the story in question spoke about the IDB providing a depletion policy. I just wanted to clarify that the story in question did not say that. It said that the IDB provided depletion policy guidelines,
Okay.
which
we
you spoke
ignored.
of.
Which we ignored.
Yes.
Okay, well that's not true too, right?
So
we didn't ignore the guidelines. We just added. No, we didn't ignore the guidelines.
Okay, so according to the IDB completion report,
So that's why, that is precisely what we look, and they pointed out that the pace is dependent on a number of variables. And the variable that the IDB did not consider is the narrow window in which fossil fuel will have in the future, the narrow window.
Okay.
Right? So it was pace development, but we're accelerating the pace.
Okay, so my actual question is in relation to the oil lots auction. I wanted to get your take on the issue of farm-ins. What is the government's plan to, one, address involvement of Guyanese? Is there going to be a set criteria if there are certain locals who would like to be involved in the oil lots auction? What would you be looking for? And secondly, how are you going to address if companies do access the blocks, then they decide to flip it in terms of giving it to ExxonMobil? How do you avoid that sort of backdoor entry into the oil blocks?
Okay, so on the first issue, this brings us to a very important point, because for a long while, people have been critical of this policy of the first come, first serve. And Kaichor News has been in the forefront to say that a number of people, Guyanese particularly, they wonder how they got the blocks because they didn't have the requisite expertise. So how do we give people who don't have any expertise or capital to develop these blocks because we want Guyanese to grow? Or do we leave it, make the criteria so exclusive that we only companies that have requisite expertise, capital, and maybe deep sea experience, which limits the group even further, because very few companies have deep water exploration and capability for extraction in deep water. So though that's a key variable, you're raising a very important issue, because if you include the Guyanese, we may be saying, people would say, oh, we're giving people an opportunity to enrich themselves here because they don't have the requisite expertise, they would only flip the blocks. And then if you don't bring them in, you say, oh, the opportunities are excluding Guyanese. So it would be interesting to start a debate of that nature without taking a position on the matter. In the newspapers, I hope that you can start a debate on it. So let's see what the pros and cons are, and it will be helpful to see where Kaichor News stands on that matter itself. So that's one. Now, clearly, if the idea is not to have more concentration in the big players, then they must have either strengthen the approval process that people have to get before they can flip. So then if they were to flip to someone who is excluded from the auction, the approval process that they have to seek from the ministry would say, no, you can't do that. So that could be controlled at that level, or you could put it in the bid itself, the bid document, to say you can't do that, right?
Sir, and the other two issues that I wanted to clarify on this matter was, one, what would be the new timeline for the auction?
Okay.
And to understand from you, given what you noted earlier, where do you stand on the involvement of Guyanese in the upcoming auction? I understand that you want to debate, but where do you stand on it?
If we could have a consortium, personally, if we could have a big consortium of Guyanese individuals, I don't know what the cabinet would be, I would say, let's give them a chance to prove what they're saying is how we can go about in this sector. That they can raise the money,
They can give better fiscal terms to the country and still make a lot of money. I would, that is, but not an individual, not individuals, because unless they participate in the auction, and with some maybe back in with expertise, but individuals it would be hard for us to do. Now, on the other hand, you can say anybody could buy the block and then flip it later, because it's your business. Once we collect our money, right, in the auction, so you get, everybody could participate in the auction, and the government gets it 5 million or 10 million per block when it was getting 0 before, and then you can then decide, having invested $10 million, you would then decide, do I have anything here? Do I have to do the seismic and then flip it? So a lot of those issues have to be, those are the contentious issues, and often, no matter what you decide, you'd have people opposed to it one way or another. If you take one position to just exclude, you have people opposed to that. And then you have another group, if you decide to include, people would say, oh, you're enriching a few people.
As for the timeline, give me a timeline.
Oh, the timeline, I don't want it, that is why they're moving parts. The biggest unknown variable, how the longest that part could take, is the one about the fiscal terms. So there is a timeline before the end of the year now, so let's leave it at that, before the end of the year.
Also on the matter of the auction, now one of the issues that was raised by several international stakeholders is that Guyana gives up the right to get any sort of taxes when these oil blocks are afloat. Is that something that the government will be looking to address? That we gain nothing if the oil blocks are afloat?
Yeah, one way or another, yeah. I think in the past, because of this first come, first served basis. But if somebody is paying you for the block, then you're saying that they have to do a lot of work to maybe get someone interested. And they may have to do seismic and stuff, so they incur costs. So I don't see it being so unfair once the auction, people access blocks through auctions.
Okay, and my two substantive questions. As regards to the field development plans, can you say when the government is likely to make your guidelines on this public, so that citizens can have a way of knowing, one, how involved you are, what's required of the oil companies, what the extent to which you're going to prevent the over-design of plans, which could include inflated costs?
So at this point in time, because the field development plans are different, the conditions are different, etc., we have gone through those internally with the help of external consultants. So they may be public documents already, the field development plans. Okay, so I'd have to, let me look at that. But the guidelines could, I'm sure that the guidelines can be put out. The guidelines don't reveal the particular field development plan. So let me find out a couple of things. Whether these are considered proprietary. Because if they're proprietary, we can't release them. But I don't see any harm in us saying that these were the parameters in which where we look out for national interests in these areas. So I don't see any harm. So I'm going to talk to the Ministry of Natural Resources to engage you on that.
And finally, ExxonMobil is moving ahead with the award of several contracts for Yellowtail, and Guyana is still with the audit for 2018-2019 costs. Can you say what mechanisms the government has in place for real-time monitoring of Exxon's costs?
Yes, but there is right now, the contract provides only for audit, and it's a post process. If you have to be involved in real-time monitoring, it means co-management. That's the only way. that Guyana will be managing the oil company. That's the only way you can deal with it now, in real time. We don't have co-management. That is why there is a mechanism provide for the audits. And if the audits find that the expenditure was unreasonable and not procured through, maybe there was insider trading or contracts provided to related companies at inflated costs, those could be disallowed. So it allows you, once the expenditures be made, to challenge those expenditures, and if successful, they have to be removed from cost oil, and therefore result in higher share of profit oil. So that is the situation based on the contract now. So there's no co-management.
Good afternoon, sir.
Yeah, good.
Sorry, you began your press conference by saying that the local government election seems to be the most important thing in this country.
Most topical.
Most topical. Okay. Guyana is running $1 trillion, US $1 trillion business. And the government, in particular you, who's heading the oil industry,
$1 trillion, yeah.
$1 trillion. We hardly, the nation hardly ever hear, or the press hardly ever hear from you as to how this sector is being managed. During your press conference a while ago, you talked about a refinery. You talked about electricity being chopped in half via the gas to shore project. And you folks, you focus on big picture and what you say. You talked about bundling of contracts. You talked about auctioning of oil blocks. You talked about insurance liability, depletion policy, and Mr. Vice President, these are all issues. This nation cannot take a sentence or a paragraph out of your mouth to really understand these issues that we're dealing with. Every one of these issues required at least 5, 6, maybe 10 press conferences to really walk through and present to this country the nitty-gritty and what is there to benefit this country in every one of them. And I came with a few questions to ask. They're very simple questions. But you get to elaborate there and let them be taken one by one.
All right. Why don't you give me the correct questions?
All right. The first question was that you went to Potential and spoke to an audience there.
Yeah.
You yourself said, and I'm quoting you, Rystad Energy and Exxon trying to prove that they are the best thing for Guyana, which is not so. These are your words, sir. The contract was bad. We have to change it in the future, but we are not going to renegotiate now. Alistair Rutledge said Saturday gone that this is the best contract ever. You saying it is bad. So there's a huge gap between you and Exxon. At present, the country is holding the wrong end of the stick. Why no renegotiation now? You are allowing Exxon to accelerate production to continue to rob this country faster than expected. Why not accelerate the renegotiation of this deal now rather than later? And that's my first question.
Okay. So I think I have a sense of deja vu that we've gone through this issue many times before. So even in that quote that you just read, I made it clear that we're not renegotiating the contract now. I explained earlier that we believe the contract is lopsided. I have not been shy about saying this in opposition and in government, and that no new contract will have those same terms. I've said that publicly. We put that in our manifesto. So we've been entirely consistent from day one. When we're in opposition, it would have been probably the most popular thing to say, oh, we're going to renegotiate as soon as we get into office. And we didn't take the easy route because it was a carefully analyzed position. I've explained already that we need the development capital to open up these opportunities. That Guyana does not have the magnitude of the capital necessary to invest in a venture of this scale. I have pointed out, comparing total deposits in our banking system, if you aggregate both private company and individual deposits, that they are a fraction, they are about 1/10 of the total required only on the 4 FPSOs. So even if we had these opportunities and we wanted to explore them using indigenous sources, we would not be able to because the capital would not be there. What is happening, and we predicted this, that now because of the quantitative easing and because of the loose fiscal policy in many parts of the world, in the period where COVID-19 raged supreme, that this created a huge inflationary pressure, apart from the supply chain problems that we've had. So both on the demand side and then on the supply side. So all of these cash grants and billions of dollars spent in the developed world, they've pushed inflation up. And now we face the consequences of this with a steep increase in interest rates. And with the interest rates climbing, you will see now it's even harder to access investable capital. A lot of the projects that may have seemed feasible in the past might not be feasible anymore because of the long-term projections on interest rate increases. From some of the sources, we were locking in at, including multilateral agencies, Islamic Development Bank, at about 3% fixed term. It's gone up now. In the last loan they're looking at, they one for Linden to Soesdijk, nearly $200 million. It's gone over 4%. So my point is that the investable capital is not there. So all of these factors have to be considered when you're making a decision. If we don't utilize this opportunity now, and especially with net zero, who is going to utilize it? It is the Saudi Arabia and Norway and the others that are busy pumping more and more oil and gas. So I have never seen a single person who said to me, if we stop them doing this, all of the people who are talking, who will do it? And so we have to leave enough incentives to allow people to invest and get a decent return, and we have to have a greater share
coming to government. I've explained before, if we engage in a renegotiation now, the momentum gets truncated. And we can't lose the momentum now, when the world can't even generate a momentum. Suriname and many of the other countries that have resources can't generate a momentum. If we kill momentum, we'd kill off the fledgling growth now in our private sector, industrializing, preparing for the future. We'd choke off the other spin-off benefits. So we need to keep the activities going, not 4 FPSOs. To keep momentum in this economy, we practically need 10 FPSOs. We need to prove our reserves. We need to extract this natural resource as quickly as possible and then convert it into monetary assets. From physical asset into monetary assets, save some for the future and invest some now, so as to generate a more sustainable non-oil economy. That's the strategy, and I've explained it, and I've explained why we can't renegotiate. So I've never seen a debate surrounding that. Can someone say to me, any of these people who are saying, don't accelerate production now, what will happen by 2035? What if there is a breakthrough technology? What if there is a carbon price of $100 per ton of every carbon emitted? What will that do to demand, global demand for energy, like fossil fuel? Where does that leave Guyana? With all of the oil in the ground, you can't monetize it. Why should our people be denied that opportunity here and now? So this is our explanation. We have not been shy about the explanation. I've just dealt with all the variables. Let me tell you what Norton's explanation was. Norton's explanation, when asked about it, Norton said basically, let me see if I have it here. Norton said, let me make it a few things clear. I don't know what barometer you use to ascertain what the people feel. But let me say this. First of all, Guyana has no resource to become involved in the exploration of oil. Parting. An agreement was signed in 1999 in which it was agreed that ExxonMobil will explore for oil. Factual. Now, having done that, this agreement was signed. The agreement having signed, I understand it provides for Exxon to produce the oil, and then you have cost oil, which is the cost to produce the oil. And once you take out cost oil, you will leave with profit oil. Now it means, therefore, without investment, I mean investment apart from natural resources, Guyana is going to benefit from profits. And then he goes on to talk, nothing else, nothing else. This is what you get from Norton. And a wishy-washy kind of approach, stating the obvious. I told you our reasoning. Why every one of these issues, you may not agree with them, but I have given you all the variables we consider, from the policy of, from unbundling, from local content legislation, to depletion policy, to auctioning, to the refinery. What are the things we consider before coming up with an agreement? I've given you the variables, not this wishy-washy position. You don't know what he's actually saying, whether he supports or he disagrees. And Ramjatan, on the other hand, very conveniently said, oh, the PPP promised to renegotiate and is now in its manifesto and is not doing so now. Convenient, it's not true, if he only listened to the press conferences. So that is the first position. We've dealt with it. And then the point about long press conference to deal 5 hours to deal with every issue. It is, Glenn, the thing is that even when we deal with issues, you're not listening to our side of the matter. You don't even portray it fairly. You take what we say and you distort it, and you know what the position is. It never gets a fair characterization in the Kaitro News because you have your position, and your position is renegotiate. At least let the other side of the argument be reflected too. Let it be reflected. And Vikram is in charge, so I'll ask him to do the 5 hours. Vikram Bharrat. I will stick with the one-on-one.
Thank you, sir. I asked just now about the negotiation of the contract.
And that's what I told you why.
And then you went on to tell me about the opposition.
Yes.
You went on to tell me about Guyana does not have money. I didn't ask that. I asked the negotiation of the contract. But can we
Well, they're all related, Glenn. That is it. Maybe I'll come on your program. This is what I do. We talk about this. Let me come on your program once again,
this week.
and we'll talk this week or next week, and we'll talk at length. But you have to promise that you are going to listen to the other side. If we ain't got money, we will give you. Imagine you were Exxon. You had a block. Well, anyhow, let's leave that for the program. Let's leave that for the program.
Thank you. So I'm seeing you next week.
All right, I'll come on the program. I'll come on the program next week.
Conference, you promised that.
All right, okay.
My second question, you had lamented about the lack of skilled forensic auditors in this country. And you found Professor Haynes
Yeah.
and put him in charge of the audit team for the prior $9 billion. He told us that with News Sunday, which I read for myself, that that they believe that Exxon Mobil overcharging and overbilling Guyana is misleading. Those were his exact words. Sir, when an auditor makes such a pronouncement up front on a company that is known worldwide for overcharging and overbilling oil countries, when a pre-contract cost submitted by ExxonMobil to Guyana was found to be highly questionable,
Yeah.
not finished,
Okay.
and a recent IDB report said that costs are an area of the greatest disagreement between oil companies and oil countries, and that countries need to be on their toes to avoid being taken for a ride. How, Mr. Vice President?
So
I, as a Guyanese,
yes, I agree with
can
almost
I not
everything.
finish my question?
No, yes, but okay.
I'm asking my question.
Yes, so let's get to the
As
question.
a Guyanese can expect this individual to carry out a thorough and fair investigation into that US $9 billion.
So-
Does that concern you?
So I have to examine, I've now read this, but if he has said this, so I don't think it should have been mentioned, but I'm qualifying that only if he said it. Now, he is not the only, there are a group of 3 or 4 Guyanese companies that were put together to build the capacity. And a foreign company working in partnership with them to do this audit. So they are doing this audit, and we want to build the capacity, transfer their skills. Now, if an auditor is doing the audit and his company, I don't think, especially he should be premature if that was said. I'm not sure it was said, but then that should have never been said. And what you said about oil companies and costs and about countries needing to be vigilant, nobody can fault you for saying that. We've seen it, and we have to be vigilant. Nobody will look out for our country if we don't look out for it ourselves. So I agree with you, and that is why we wanted Guyanese companies, because when you hire the foreign companies, we say they work for Exxon, or they have audited Exxon before, so they may be in Exxon's book. So we are trying to build a local capacity to do our own audits, so people who are more national in their outlook will look out for our interests. But I will check. I'll check if that was said.
Can I just do a quick follow-up on what you said here? Who is authorizing and monitoring these inflated costs that are throwing at us?
Well, that is where the audit is supposed. I just explained that there is no provision in the contract for co-management, although we are entitled to 50% of the profit, but they manage. There's an operator that operates on behalf of the shareholders that run the company. So assuming the costs are inflated, when the audit is done, this is a post-expenditure control. Then when the audit is done and they find inflated costs or unreasonable procurement practices that have led to inflated costs, they can then flag those and have those adjusted. And then Exxon has to explain. And that's the control. So this is how you control those. All right, Sabrok?
Can I ask just one quick question?
Okay, all right, let me come back to you. Let's get this Sabrok first.
Production sharing report. A year and a half now. You have promised to make that public.
Production sharing?
That has been missing.
Oh, the production report.
Yeah, and they come out, I told them at least every week and stuff like that we can put that. That's not secret data or anything like that. So let me find out again. What did Vikram say?
Well, I don't know. We've been trying to.
Did you ever ask him pointedly? He's the minister. Vikram, you never asked him. Don't wait until you come to my press conference to ask. Give him a call and say,
sir,
we should get.
Sir, you asked us to seek the bauxite, gold, diamond, and all these manganese contracts from GRA and GGMC. To date, I have tried personally. I've spoken to all the heads, and they refuse to get them.
No,
So
on the
could be.
yes.
Have you
But I
tried?
saw Stacey's reply. So he did reply to you because he's administering some of these contracts, right, on the fiscal terms of the contract. But agreements, I think, did you explore this Freedom of Information Act? But I don't think these agreements should be secret.
Exactly.
Because the concessions are standard. If we gave, like, moving away, you recall, many people don't remember this, but the Minister of Finance used to sign every duty-free letter. That was when I was there. And we changed it when I became president, and even before that we started moving to change it, where all of that, the administering of duty-free concessions, would be done by the GRA and not by a political individual. And secondly, there would be based on legislation. So if you're investing in tourism, then if you invest in a hotel of a particular magnitude, everybody should be getting the same concession. If you see someone who got extra concession, then something unusual happened there. So I don't see the reason why many of these are not in the public domain already. But I'll find out a bit more. Yeah, let me find out a bit more.
All right. Thank you.
Good afternoon, I just have two quick questions.
Oh, it's next year or two?
Yeah,
You know,
trying to wrap.
okay, all right.
You spoke about co-management to have, and that is what would be required to have costs in sight. I'm trying to find, I think that would be the same explanation, or if I can conclude that we have limited or no participatory role as it relates to procurement of goods and services for the sector?
Precisely, that is why by regulation now, by the Local Content Act, we now have mandated this.
My second question, sir, as it relates to insurance coverage for oil spill, with the 600 million that we have
Per event, and the possible 2 billion from the parent company. Suffice you have the act and the information in the permit. Is the government concerned that we might end up in court with Exxon? Or is the government concerned that the sum we have is too small maybe because we may end up in court with Exxon on the issue?
Well, first of all,
I'm hoping that we would not have an oil spill. That's what my big hope is, that we would not have an oil spill, and I think they're hoping for that too. That is why the technology and the carefulness, because nobody wants to spend billions of dollars. So I think we share that interest. What I said is that they are liable according to the law and the EPA for full coverage. They submitted insurance policy to cover 600 million per event. The negotiation now of the so-called 2 billion, whether that's adequate or not, it has to ensure that full coverage is there. And then we have the assets of the company, the $7 billion that you can also go against. So they have to, the ultimate aim is to have a guarantee that covers any such liability. That is the aim, a guarantee that does that.
understood? So that is to say we do not have a total package as yet.
Which is inclusive.
That is why the negotiations are taking place. That's why the negotiations were taking place.
And that's a concern for some stakeholders because we're pumping and we're going faster and we do not have that complete package. So, and we're also looking at legitimate liability. We could end up in court arguing with Exxon over what they can cover. So together we actually have a 2.6 billion coverage.
You're just parroting the old kind of argument again.
Based on the information.
No, you're parroting the same old thing. I'm not going back through that. I made it clear from the beginning what their position is. So we are working towards this full coverage. It's by law and by the permit, they have to do this. Full coverage. So that's an obligation at this point in time.
No problem.
So all that we have to now get is the instrument to give that the effect. We've gotten one such instrument that is being worked on, the second instrument. That's it.
Is that a concern that we don't have?
Well, we should shut down pumping. Liza 1 had no such requirement. In fact, and we were pumping oil that the same Vincent Adams approved. Liza 1 had no such requirement.
Okay,
What insurance he had at that time for Liza 1? And the same arguments you're making here. So I've dealt with that matter already. Let's move on to something else.
Can you give us the
Progress on having that policy in country. It's not together yet, but what work is happening right
The
now?
thing is that on that policy, if there is an insurance policy that exceeds a particular threshold and you have to go through a local broker, it means a lot of money for one broker. Whoever gets that chosen. So if it's an insurance, if it's a parent guarantee, it does not cost the company any money, therefore the premium, nor does it cost us because we're part of this. So that's why I'm saying that it's beyond the capability of the local insurance industry to provide such a coverage. You know that they would have to reinsure, and that means going through a broker. So that was one issue, and what was the next one? There are two issues. Yeah.
Good afternoon. Two questions. First one is on cost of living. We have seen governments putting or giving out cash grants to certain selected groups in society. When I say groups, I would refer to like the fishermen and so to cushion the impacts of cost of living. But is government looking at any new plan where the entire population could benefit from any measure, cost of living measure?
Okay.
And two, just to clarify, if when you opened your press conference, you said that you spoke on local government elections. Is it that the PPP is ready to go to local government elections and will be contesting?
Yeah, the PPP will contest local government elections. Norton said he's not contesting elections unless the new voters list. There's a new voters list. Norton can't bully the government or the country not having local government elections. He is probably had a good dream in Congress Place, sleeping down there. But he can't bully the local government shall take place. We don't know the timing because we don't control that. The PPP will participate. He now has to backpedal, go back down basically, and contest the elections. I'm sure he will. Don't worry with all this big gaff. Okay, that's one. Yes.
The second one was on cost of living.
Yes, the cost of living. Is that all? You want to go through the others? All right. Okay, let me deal with the cost of living. So, cost of living is a real issue. It's a real issue. It's affecting Guyanese everywhere. We've seen the increase in prices at various levels. And so the first policy that the government took in place, to put in place, was to remove the taxes. So that taxes have the benefit of helping everyone. We removed the VAT on lube oil, because with the common external tariff we could not remove, but we removed the VAT on lube oil. We removed the 50% tax on fuel, and that has made a huge difference because the price of fuel, gasoline, diesel, etc., they feed into production and also transportation. So that's the first measure that we introduced. Secondly, we decided that we had already removed the value-added tax on hinterland travel and freight into the hinterland. But we decided that in the hinterland areas, and riverine areas, the people are disproportionately affected because although cost of living is high on the coast and has increased, in those areas it's magnified because of higher transportation costs. So what has happened is that there's an across-the-board grant to every household in those areas to address the cost of living. That's the second measure that we put in place. The third measure is that we believe that although we may not be able to address the cost of living directly through reduction in prices, that we could also help on the production side where the cost of inputs have gone up. So for the farmers, the big issue was the cost of fertilizer, that skyrocketed because of the price of oil. So they have this $1 billion program to assist them. So you have a dual benefit there. They go back to production, which can keep supply up and prices down, that is for the cash crops. And then they also, because of lower input costs, because they're getting help, their marginal income could improve so that they would assist them to better cope with, not to address cost of living directly, but to cope with the cost of living. The same thing, the fishermen issue had been predated this issue about their long period when they were not, the season change, as FAO pointed out, when Lal said it was the oil companies chasing away the fish, but there was a commitment to assist them in that regard, so they are now getting some help. In terms of supplementing family income, we also decided that the part-time employment. So we have now 11,000 people, there'd be another 4,000 people, mainly women and young people across the country. 15,000 people, maybe you'd have an impact about maybe 3, 4 per household. You're going to have about 60,000 people benefiting from that. That's only on the coast. We have increased in the hinterland from 2,000, another 500 CSOs. So you cushion also, you supplement family income at that level. We are hoping also that this $30,000 that their families have received from the government would assist with some of the cost of living measures too, although it wasn't designed originally for cost of living. So we are one of few. We then, at the customs level, we've still maintained the policy almost for 2 years now, a year and a half, where we're using the old freight rate to calculate the taxes, because the CIF value, you levy the tax on an ad valorem basis on CIF. So when the freight component of it went up from like $3,000 to $20,000, so the cost, insurance, and freight, and then you put the tax on that, we're using the old freight rate. So that has lowered the taxes that people had to pay, and therefore, hopefully it would abate some of the price increases. On the small people who are constructing, we recognize that the price of labor has gone up because there's a boom. We have a scarcity now in some skills, and then the cost of living for steel and others, the price of steel and cement. So that is why we have launched a program where for small homes below a particular level, they will get all the steel for free and the cement. And then for those slightly above, they will get some cement. All of these are direct intervention methods that we are using to hopefully cushion the cost of living. And that's not the end. We're still assessing this to see what more impact. We're looking now at the pensioners. We're starting to look at pensioners to see what we can do in that regard. So it is we are one of the few countries that have launched a lot of these measures. Because look at the US, it got hit heavily, well, around the world with cost of living measures. So those are just some of the issues.
Follow-up on local government. Once he communicates their willingness their readiness to host LGE, would the government call over government elections?
Yes.
And that will happen this year?
I don't know. They have to write. They'd have to write indicating. GCOM would have to write indicated when they're ready. But the People's Progressive Party, I speak for the PP as General Secretary, and I've already convened a meeting, and we've started working on our organizational structures around the country. We've put our party on a readiness mode.
Mr. Jagdeo, just a follow-up to David's question. GCOM has signaled that it is working towards late November, early December to have LGE, local government elections. In relation to the electoral reforms, do you anticipate that this should be finished by that time frame?
Yes, as soon as I'm assured now by Geltisher and Anil Nandalal that the consultations are being completed, the draft is ready, so as soon as we come out of recess, we should have at least the Representation of the People Act passed in Parliament.
My first question is pertaining to what you said earlier about the International Decade of People of African Descent Assembly and the money being given to them. Is this organization being audited, and do they have to put forth any sort of a work plan or criteria for continual access
I've been discovering a lot after this press conference, as I prepare for the press conference. So they have an audit, but the audit just tells you the areas that they spent the money in. But really, from this audit that I saw, the 2021, nothing was spent on people. You know, it's all for themselves, administrative. So I don't know whether they have submitted any work plan, but clearly there's no work being done to help anybody, any Afro-Guyanese. Just help them helping themselves. It's no work plan that I've seen. In fact, that is what I would like to be asked. People should question them. In fact, ordinary people should say, you received nearly $500 million in our name. How have you spent the money? Every group that represents Afro-Guyanese should say that. Ask them, how did you spend the money? Because next thing when we ask for that, they would say, oh, it's a party, the PPP wants to know how they're spending the money, although it's taxpayers' money. So I agree, you asked some very important questions here that I really don't have answers to give you on. So we'll find out though. We'll try to find out.
The audit is being done by the audit office.
No. This is that's what another issue is, that the audit office should have, because these are public funds. But I see they have a private auditor here, Atlee. Oh, no, actually these are not audits. These are just financial statements. I'm just looking at them. No, I thought that these were audits. Did I say financial statements? Okay, yeah, I somehow had the impression. They're financial statements. So the audit should have been done by the Auditor General's office.
So can you say why the audits are not being done?
I don't know. Let me don't venture any information more because I don't know. It should have happened. It's not happening. And they had nearly 500 million Ghana dollars at their disposal. And from what I see here is nothing has gone to ordinary people.
So they have no reporting obligations to the government? Is there something government in the...
I dealt with that already. I dealt with that. I can't, no, not that I know, they don't report to anyone. The money comes through the Ministry of Youth, Sport and Culture, and this morning I spoke with Mr. Ramson, and he doesn't receive any report from them.
My other question is pertaining to something that was mentioned by the leader of the opposition earlier this week. He spoke about free university and the removal of existing student debt for students who owe the university. I know that the PPP has already established free university as a manifesto promise. Can you say does the PPP have a plan for the rollout of free university?
Who said that? Norton said that?
Yes.
He promised that.
No. Anyhow, everybody knows that that's part of our campaign on the manifesto. And we made it clear that within 5 years we'll do it. We can do it in the first year. We're aiming to do that within 5 years, and that also we will work out a plan to address the debt. I've spoken about this 100 times, literally. But this guy is bereft of ideas. So I suspect he's just going around picking up the PVP documents and repeating them. Bereft of ideas.
Is there a timeline for
Yes. I said we said within the 5 years. So that is why we wanted to pace ourselves. On the scholarships, we had said 20,000 within 5 years. That's part of our manifesto too. But now we have revised this upwards. So more likely we'll end up with 30, 40, 50, maybe even 50,000 scholarships in the first 5 years. So we're not remaining static there, although we had that promise too.
Yeah, sure. I mean,
Sir, so just to clarify two things, and then I have a substantive question.
Earlier, what you mentioned about the depletion policy, is it the fact that the PPP is being guided by the short window and net zero by 2050? Do you now not see a need for a depletion policy, or do you still think that that's something that you might want to take on board?
So the depletion policy is just that. And if you look around the world, every country, every single developing country is trying to do this as quickly as possible. Some of them are struggling. In Africa, we have people trying to hold them back too. And I'm shocked that this is coming from locals here. In Africa, it's coming from the external groups. Africa must not use gas, their own gas, to generate power. Never mind, millions of people, tens of millions of people don't have electricity. And never mind that the countries from which the consultants are coming from, they're utilizing, they're generating power from coal and from fossil fuel and everything else, but they're lecturing Africa, don't use your natural gas because we have net zero and it will blow your emission targets. So we have this happening, and frankly speaking, the entire continent is very defiant. You look at all from COP26 to every other meeting of the African continent, their leaders are saying, we will develop our resources. We're at this stage. Suriname is trying to do that. So I'm shocked that in this country, people should be supporting us to do this. But their arguments are even closer to the developed world that wants to prevent us from doing this whilst they're busy exploring the opportunities. The developed world they want to veto expenditure in the developing world for oil and gas, but they're opening up more oil fields in their own country because they don't want the investments to flow under this guise of energy security and increased demand. We've seen this happen over and over again. So sometimes I wonder whether the local NGOs are working for us, I don't mean the PPP or the government, but for our country or for these organizations that want to prevent us moving forward. You think the African leaders, or in Guyana, when we go down the road and the people ask for power, they want the power line extended. Or we're going to say, oh, we're worried about the emission levels or something like that. People want to live a decent life. And the same thing in Africa and India too, and all these places, the developing world. They just, all these lectures we get. So I'm sorry I vented a bit.
I noticed with the last few press conferences, a lot of the questions we raised, we've been encouraging ways, and you've been saying, let's see what happens.
Yeah.
Is this a new direction that you're taking to take your cue about where you're taking the country from what the public?
Yeah, yes, and the public, the debates allow you to see the broad spectrum of views. Because right now, and if it's a civilized debate, if it's a debate respectful of the other views, you can disagree, but you recognize that the other person has a point of view. In those discussions, the debates, you really could help to hone and sharpen policy making, because that's how countries are. A lot of things that you may think you have a perspective on, it comes out in the debate that you need to look at something else. Like this whole point that was made earlier about locals versus foreigners and who gets the block. So if we go with the tradition, we shouldn't give any of them the traditional view, because none of them had the experience. Then you used to say that Phip Motilal used to sell clothing and how he got a road contract. Remember that one? and stuff like that. You recall the early days when you cussed me every single day in your newspapers? Up till now, I'm still getting cussed though, by the way. Yes, so.
All right, so my
Yes.
question, sir.
President will speak on this matter. So I did not want to be preemptive. And I know he has a strong view on this issue. So I spoke with him about this matter a few days now. And he has made it clear he is given direction to the police force to have a full and complete investigation and with external support. And so he will speak a bit more about that issue once he returns. So I've been asked my personal views on this matter many times, and I think a lot of people have been trying to get a feeling as to what our thinking is. So I'm General Secretary of the People's Progressive Party. And there is one thing that the People's Progressive Party will not let happen. It is to have its reputation sullied by any individual. We understand that the opposition, which has an agenda, will try to always do that with the People's Progressive Party. But barring from what you will hear, the shrill noise out of Congress Place, for us, the public domain and public opinion and the opinion of people matter. And I want to say to them this today. When we campaign for re-election, I met with people from all walks of life and every race who had grave concerns about what APNO was doing. People were losing jobs. They said to me money was not circulating in the economy, had major problems with the issues, basic issues like aloofness and licensing fee and being discriminated against. And we made a promise to all of those people. When we return to office, we will address their concerns. People of every race. Tamesh Jagmohan, Azruddin Mohammed, and Roger Khan. Roger Khan was abroad, and the two others were busy making money too. They were working, making money. Their concerns do not preoccupy me at night. Their concerns, the concerns of ordinary people and the people we looked at in their faces, people of every race, every walk of life, those are the ones that drive us to work hard every single day to change this country, not the concerns of these individuals. The People's Progressive Party will not condone any illegal act on the part of any of those individuals that I mentioned, or others for that matter. People have to face consequences for their action, whatever their action is.
And that is where we stand today. And you heard, I told you what the president said. There shall be a full and complete investigation. He's giving directions and with external support. And some practices may have to change. Yes, when I listened to the Commissioner of Police about Bascom, and they were talking about who he was working with, and whether he was moonlighting or not. But the Commissioner said this is a sanctioned practice of the police, and it has gone on for many, many years, including the 5 years of APNU. And so the policy is that the police helps to escort the gold, these gold purchases. They can then, when they buy the gold, the police is then paid. There's a standard practice. Every year of APNU took place. Didn't happen recently. And they escort the gold down to Georgetown or wherever they're kept. Now, in that, we have to find another safe way of doing this. Because when this happens, there is a coziness that develops between elements in the police and these people. Because of that relationship that they're working legally, but a coziness starts developing there. And therefore, things have to change. Now, I don't know whether Bascom is credible or not, but he has made allegations that have to be looked into, and the president has said that already. I don't know. But this, nobody, none of these individuals, they were not the ones walking the ground, going house to house, trying to win support for this party in the election period. So I feel no sense of obligation to anyone. It is the ordinary people who are beating the bush to get this party re-elected. And so that is our position on this matter. And we will not countenance any illegality by anyone. Not going to allow them or anybody to taint the People's Progressive Party. So that is all I'm going to say on this matter. That's all.
Sir, that's a strong position, but don't you preempt concerns about the police force investigating itself?
Well, the president has said, made it clear, with external support. The president has, we can't also undermine the confidence in the police force. We need to have some confidence in the leadership of the police force. But like any organization, you do have people who don't act in the best interest. So I don't know what is the truth of this matter. I'm not commenting on what is factual or not. The truth, I don't know. But the president said there shall be an investigation with external support, and I'm just telling you my party's position on this matter. And so that's all I wanted to say. Yeah, sure.
Vice President, I have a question about the comments you made about gas to shore and just two substantive questions. On the project management for gas to shore, the public notices mentioned that it would give the contractor up to about 4 years to complete the project. Given that the government has been saying that it wants to deliver gas to shore in 2024, do you see at this point timeline?
If the public,
This is a 2 years project. That is the first 2 years. So by 2024, the power plant has to be in place. The NGL facility may not be completed. It's a bit more complex until 2025. So what happens is that they will feed the raw gas to the power plant in the first year, and then when the NGL facility is completed, then the gas would be dried, and then the lean gas would be fed to the power plant, and then you get the liquids. So I guess that could explain that issue.
Recently, Repsol announced that they struck water in the Kublok offshore. Are you concerned that recent finds that were not deemed commercial or drilling that came up dry outside of the Starbuck block would dampen excitement about the prospectivity of the basin outside of Starbuck?
Sure. The thing is that drilling is often a hit and miss issue, and it's a number of skills that you have to bring to the table, including proper interpretation of seismic and all of that. I don't think globally the excitement about the Guyana Basin has abated anyway whatsoever, given that. Because mirroring that, you have these prolific finds by Exxon in the Stabroek block. And so I guess what may more dampen the bidding process is the cost of capital has been going up now. And so that may be a bigger issue. But I don't think there's any change in the excitement level.
Okay, finally, in the R&D block in 2019, there was a discovery of the Delta well. And the partners said that they were going to be reassessing the commerciality of that find given the oil
prices. Yeah.
I don't know that we can exactly reassess commerciality without considering the fiscal terms, and you've made it explicit that if anybody wants to come to produce outside of
Right,
Starbuck,
sure.
to have different terms. So have the partners approached
I'm not aware that they have approached. I'm not aware. If they have, they must have approached Vic, but I have no such report.
Mrs. Jagdeo, during your opening remarks, you spoke about the gas issue project and how profitable it can be. Is there at the same time, just for the record?
I didn't get that.
Which project I spoke of?
Gas energy.
Yeah, oh, okay.
So, sorry, like I said, you spoke about how profitable it can be. But at the same time, just for the record, can you say if the government is considering any casualties in its assessment? And for clarity, are you saying that...
Like, what do you mean casualties? People dying? Like, tell me a bit more about these casualties.
Explosives or any sort of incident?
Yeah, well,
As a result of the project?
listen, and that's what the point I was trying to make, that with a power plant at Kingston, we could have an explosion. That's not an excuse for not building a power plant. The world, billions of gigawatt hours are generated from gas projects in the world, billions of gigawatt hours. So you would have to have mitigation plan for everything, like anything else. You have to have mitigation plan for in an event of that nature to address it. But that doesn't change the commercial viability of the project. And so we're not skimping corners on safety provisions. We're not going to skimp corners to make it commercially viable. You know, sometimes people shortcut the provisions for safety. There shall be none of that.
So, sir, on that note, on safety and so on, the gas leak management plan, you spoke about this as well. Can you say if this plan is only...
What gas?
Leak management plan. Can you say if this is only going to be...
The thing is a little rough on me, yes. So, the gas, what?
Gas leak management.
Oh, the gas leak. I dealt with that too, yeah.
Yes, so I'm asking, just for clarity, if you're saying that this is only going to be put in place after that pipeline is...
No. I'm saying between now and the completion of the pipeline, we have probably a year and stuff like that. Over a year. Before we actually bring the gas in, it's 2024.
Alright, secondly, sir, the
So we will practically own all of these. It's the government of Ghana that will own, because we're paying, eventually we'll own the pipeline, we own the power plant, we'll own the NGL facility. We want to own this. We don't want Exxon to own this. And that's why we're getting these numbers down. So we will have to look at this. On the pipeline bit, until we've paid off it fully, remember it's being paid from cost oil, I explained that the last time. So there would have to be some insurance on it just in case anything goes wrong for in the period until it gets transferred totally, right? But at this, we want to own these things. We want to own the power plant. That's Guyana.
So until that time, until we have paid off.
Yeah, well then there would have to be, yes, measures just in case they have anything like say a leak or a pipeline rupture or something like that, that it has to be fixed. I'm sure there will be insurance.
You're sure, but have you commenced any negotiations with Exxon?
How are we gonna do? It's like, how are you gonna start the insurance? The first of all, the people are gonna say, the insurers, where is this pipeline? Have you built this pipeline? They said, no, we're only procuring material now. We're procuring the material to start laying. We're now mapping the route. We're still mapping the route. We're completing the environmental studies, and we have to put in place. They'd say, when you have done that, when you know the final cost, then we can talk about insurance. It's reasonable. It's common sense. You can't not know the cost of the total pipeline as yet and seek to insure it. You understand? If you got a house and you build a house with $20 million, you don't know the house. You start the foundation and you go to the insurance company and they say, what are we insuring?
But in all fairness, then Exxon has already awarded contracts. But anyway.
Yeah, but we don't know the total cost of the project, right?
Okay, moving on to
Material, and that's the long lead items. The long lead items and stuff. That takes a couple of years to produce.
Sir, besides a new fire station and more fire trucks as indicated by the Home Affairs Minister, can you say what other mechanisms are being put in place by the government to respond to any emergencies that may arise at the Wales site or along the pipeline? So taking into consideration that an explosion at the Cuba fuel depot took 5 days to be controlled.
The thing is that I don't think I made myself clear. So if we're going to have a mitigation plan that will be there in the future, the mitigation plan may say, in the event of a leakage, like how we have as part of the Payara license, the only capping stock in the region, although Trinidad has been producing oil and gas for all these years, over 100 years, they don't have capping stock. It's very costly. We've made that a requirement in the Payara license to have one in the country. It's a first in this region. So you have the capability right here in Guyana, and then you have a subscription with another capping stock. So you would have to, if we say there could be several things, an explosion, you could have a leak, all of that. You have to build a capability to address all of these issues right there. And so that is the capability that will be addressed. And I'm not sure, have you gone to the hearings on this matter? Have you been to the hearing when the environmental permit was done? You went there, right? So these are the issues for there. But for me, it's quite clear. I don't understand. Like, maybe I'm just like out of touch with people thinking, but things have to go sequentially for me. That's in my head, logically. So we're now on the stage of getting the pipeline, the contracts awarded, etc. It's built. We have to protect our people in any case against any eventuality. Is this not common sense, or am I missing something here? That all of those, including the fire capability, it seems as though you just want a plan, a perfect plan. You're not interested in getting this thing done. That's what the media. You just have to find stories to write because it doesn't sound logical to me. You know, if you have insurance, if you don't build the houses yet, how are you going to get insurance on the house? If you haven't even, you know what the threats are, you have to build capability, but we didn't even break the ground to put up the power plant as yet, and you want us to put in a fire station.
Maybe we just ask him because 7 years later we still don't have a full insurance plan. So maybe we just trying to get everything.
Or maybe you're asking because you just want to be difficult. And that's it. And that's it. Because how could you reasonably have insurance without the house being built already? It's just that it. You have it's just something that I find very weird, strange. Things have to be logical too. Yes, go on.
Just two final questions for me. With respect to CGX, the company noted in its latest financial statements that it would not be able to meet the deadline for the port, the offshore port for the Deepwater project. What would be the next move for government? Because I know that the president has said that he is paying attention to the fact that the company is in dire straits and is unable to keep up with deadlines. What would be the next move now for government? And finally, on local content, there seems to be a worrying trend with respect to renting of citizens. You yourself have spoken about this, and it doesn't seem as though there's any stopping where this is concerned. Does the government intend to put in place stricter guidelines or penalties to sort of stem this tide?
This is where we're hoping the media would be as vigilant and identify the frontiers too, because first of all, we had to get a piece of legislation of this nature passed in the parliament. People don't understand, a lot of people, how important this was. Because some countries have gone through their entire history without a legislation that have been oil and gas producers, without having a legislation of this effect. If you talk to the locals, leaving the gripe aside, the solid locals, and not those, the fronters and everyone else, they will tell you that the attitude of the oil and gas companies and therefore their contractors have changed, more respectful now, because in the past they're treating people like dirt in some cases. Because now they know they're mandated by law, there's a fine if they don't comply. So that's one. So the respect is there. We had to come up, we had a ton of things under the sun. Everybody was piling in. And at one stage I said, let's complete this, because we had to get it out. So we have in there some areas where we may have overestimated the capacity of the locals and other areas underestimated. But we saw this as a work in progress. Let us put it in place. Let's build a mechanism, the Secretariat. Let's strengthen that mechanism. As we go along, we're going to perfect this law. We can adjust the percentages, and we can build a capacity. And we will identify all the loopholes along the way too. And then we can close the loopholes and institute the penalties. So it's not going to be perfect. That's how I wanted people to see this. It's not going to be perfect in the first year, but it has shifted the momentum, the dynamic in favor of locals. That is what we wanted. So now, having done that, now we've started honing in on the same thing that you mentioned about how people are beating the system. One is they are increasing, they have to meet a 75% management to qualify as a local company, 75% Guyanese. So what they're doing, they're taking junior staff and redesignating them as managers now, not adjusting their pay. So then suddenly it looks like if they have 4 expats, then, and they've now included maybe 16 persons in management, and they only had 5 in the past, or 10. So that's one way they're beating the loophole. Then they have side agreements. So you get the company, the local gets 51% of the shares, but they have a side agreement to get a big management fee. So they take their cut off the top from gross revenue. So that's another way that they're trying to beat the system. So there are several ways that we have identified now that they're trying to beat the system in. And we will close those loopholes. They're like, we're going to close the unbundling and then this issue of payment. We said that to Exxon a long time. When we were drafting the legislation, we were told that there is a provision, I was told specifically, in the legislation that would allow us to do that. In the legislation itself, I just saw a legal opinion that said, no, we can't do it now. But I was told specifically, because that was one of my key issues, we have to address it. The payment, they can't wait 90 days to pay local companies. They have to pay them earlier. I don't care who defends that from Exxon or not. We've made that clear as a local position. So we want to close this, but you have to see this as a work in progress as we try to improve on the legislation.
And I ask you about the CGX.
Oh, the CGX. So I think the agreement was that they gave up the two blocks that they have and then focus on the one. The facility they were building was not a deep water port. It was a facility that may have done some cargo, but was to service their operations. So I think there is still need for that. So we have to re-engage on that. Already they had 55 acres there. And when they missed the deadline, I think we cut it down to 25 or 30. I can't remember the exact. So we already adjusted the acreage that they had since 2009 because they didn't utilize it. And so if they don't move swiftly on that, we'd have to look at it again. Yes. Thank you very much.